Good afternoon and welcome to the second capital budget meeting of the 2023-2024 budget year. This afternoon, CAO Troke will present a revised draft capital budget. The revision is based on details provided by Council on February 21st budget meeting. The expectation is that Council will provide direction at the end of this meeting to staff with regards to the disposition of the draft budget. Members of Council were provided with copies of the capital budget on Friday, 14th of April for review prior to this meeting. During the presentation, members of Council are encouraged to ask questions of the CAO or directors for clarification of budget and details. The meeting is being conducted in Council chambers and is being live streamed. This meeting is called to order. The Chair notes that all members of Council are present and we have a quorum. As this is a special Council meeting, there is one agenda item, the capital investment plan or capital budget. If I could have a motion to accept the proposed agenda, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And for the second, Deputy Mayor, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. The floor is yours, CAO.
Thank you very much, and welcome Council to this special meeting where we had gone through much of this documentation back in February. I'm going to go fairly quick, but please at any point in time, happy to delve deeper into some information. The larger package was given out to Council, so everybody should have the detailed package, which you would have seen in years previous. There was a few pages where there is some information in there in the cut and paste. One side or the other of some of these pages, particularly in the very back, are old schedules that aren't needed, but happy to discuss if anybody has any questions on anything obviously they read in that document. So for purposes of our meeting today, I'm going to just, as per the last time, go through these items, but also there's a few items that I'm going to highlight as they're new. So for example, under general administration, there is an item here, we're calling it a heat pump, but this is actually the rooftop unit here over on the building that just failed. So since it did, and we know it's going to be in the budget, we've added it. So this is the heating and cooling system for the finance end of the building. And so we want to keep our accountants happy and warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So that's in there as a new item. The other two items were previously before Council when we ran through this. So from an occupational health and safety perspective, there's a requirement to fence off the large generator out back. And typically each year we have about $20,000 worth of software purchases. So that's what we have in there this year. So $50,000 in total from general administration, and the $50,000 of that is coming from reserves.
Questions directly to the CAO, or if you wish to call on one of the directors, please do not hesitate. Just hit your switch and we'll have whoever you need up there.
Thank you. So under protective services, the only change you're going to see from the last time is the vehicle, which at $70,000, there typically is some residual or trade-in value. Of course, the police vehicles, of course, there's all kinds of rules now with regards to how you would liquidate. But in this particular case here, we do feel that there is some salvage value from the vehicle that's being replaced. So we've included that. So there's $25,000 in repair. So folks will recall last year there was some upgrades to the entryway in the building. There's some exterior upgrades are needed just as the building ages. So there's a $25,000 placeholder there for work that's required on the building. The vehicle, which at $70,000 and an assumed $3,000 trade-in or residual value on the vehicle that we'll be getting rid of. And the equipment purchase here, this is specific to the fingerprint scanning machine. So it's about $50,000. It's a very specialized piece. There were repairs done to the machine to allow it to keep working, but we are on borrowed time, so it's one of those items that we brought forward. So $145,000 is the total capital budget around protective services. $25,000 would be related to borrowing, $50,000 worth of reserves, and $67,000 with regards to operational. And this is one of the few places where you see operational monies from the town land in the capital budget, because the majority of the capital budget is either based on the borrowing reserves, grants, and so on. So under transportation, so this is mainly vehicles.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
sorry.
Councillor Maxwell, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could be a little bit more specific about, like the building upgrades, and repairs. I understand that we did the door and everything, last time, but I'm just wondering, what in particular, is there a particular project for 25,000, or what are we kind of looking at for that?
Sure, thank you, Counselor. So it's basically the exterior of the building. Some of the soffits need some work, some of the, just the exterior of the building. We did try and get some quotes last year around kind of the, more of a major facelift around the building. It's very, very expensive, so this is kind of more of that piecemeal approach to some of the odds and sods maintenance that needs to be done on the exterior of the building. So it's mainly that soffits, finish, and siding on the building that just needs some work after a number of years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, two major items, and of course, one of these, the salt truck / plow, so this is our single axle. Typically, we have tried to replace these, they're normally around a 10-year life. The reality of it is we are really pushing it to get a 10-year life out of most of these vehicles now. So in future years, we might in fact need to be looking at a replacement schedule more quickly than that. So the salt truck / plow has been tendered. I can tell you that the quotes that we received are actually under this number. So we anticipate this number, once we do finalize all of the gear and everything on it, will be less. But this is kind of the ballpark what we expect to see with regards to the salt truck. So we had a number of bidders, and we know that the bidders we received on this are under that amount with the fit up. So now we're just down to some odds and sods with regards to the complete delivery of those vehicles to finalize that number. The street sweeper, again, because of the tight turning areas in town, our street sweeper we have is a cab over design, which they do not have anymore unless you custom order it. So we have a number of companies who supply street sweepers who have units that they claim can make those tight turning circles for us. And obviously they need to have the appropriate hydrovac capacity as well for sucking out sewers and whatnot. We do have, again, and this is the same as last year, we have a placeholder of 350,000 with the anticipation we're going to have a company or two demo what they have. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, then we're obviously going to continue working with what we have as a street sweeper. But it's also one of those things, many municipal units have gone down the road of using third parties for this service. But those are also very difficult to find. And again, the same thing, these are larger street sweepers that are out there and not always capable of doing all the streets that you might have in a tighter circle at the end of cul-de-sacs and so on.
Thanks, CAO. There's some questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair to the CEO. So looking at under transportation, and I know this is obviously one of the items being 750,000, but under total projects for transportation, we have 1,565,000.
Yes.
Of which 86% of that is being financed.
Yes.
So I see there's 120 coming from cap reserve and 105 coming from the town capital cap reserve. Does that deplete those two reserves? I'm just wondering why 86% of the 1.5 is being financed, and if that was the intent previously. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Okay,
thank you. So generally what happens, so first of all, our capital reserves as of March 31st on the capital side, we're at $1,750,000.
Okay.
And so in this budget, when you look at the capital reserves that we're utilizing, that number would drop to 1.377. So we still have a healthy capital reserve balance. The reason for financing is typically when you have items that have a 10-year life or longer expectancy, you start to look at financing versus capital. And it's just because that item, so thinking about streets, think about trucks, that if they can have that 10-year life,
Okay.
financing tends to be the more appropriate way to match the asset and the expected life of the asset. We do have, obviously, debentures that we go through the Municipal Finance Corporation for. And in this case here, while right now we have borrowing associated with the salt truck and the street sweeper, if we cannot get the street sweeper, then that's $350,000 we won't borrow,
Right.
right? So normally the borrowing number, when you have assets that should have 10+ years,
Okay.
we look at financing. Anything shorter than that, we look at using the capital reserve to cover it.
Okay, and may I? Do we have a sense of what that financing looks like in terms of cost? Just generally?
Yeah, so it's still substantially less than what a posted bank rate would be.
Sure, sure.
The number is obviously up from last year.
Yeah.
So the debenture rates right now that we have are tied to the current borrowing requirement for this fiscal year just passed. So I don't have the number for where we're going to be kind of in the spring of next year.
Okay.
But as long as rates stay flat,
Yes.
then anticipated year over year should be almost identical.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I think you answered one of my questions, Dan. It was gonna be, I believe the county has the street sweeper with the big on the front.
Yep.
I don't know whether they would come do a demo, doesn't make any difference. Any idea what the cost of a cab over custom would be in regards to?
Yeah, so that's where the 350 is ballpark where you're gonna be. So this for us would be replacing what we have, or assuming. But also, the timeline on that becomes the other side of it. So what we're seeing here right now is we're expecting kind of a demo of a couple of what is not custom to see if it would work. If it did, obviously we consider that, and we would anticipate it would come in less than the 350. But at this point in time, we haven't had a demo to know if that's gonna be where we're gonna land.
And this was a lease that we bought out? No? Sorry.
It's okay.
No, the street sweeper was bought in '08, I believe, so it's
It's well
yeah,
used.
what's that, 13, 15?
Yep.
Almost 15 years. I think it was maybe in '08, maybe even ordered in '07, cab over. A cab over replacement may very well be $375 to $400 if we have to go to that custom truck. The county has a Vector, but not a sweeper.
But not, yeah.
They don't sweep, they just use that for sucking,
Graves
usually
and stuff.
wastewater, well, mostly wastewater, manholes and things like that, catch basins. Our unit also has that ability, and we use that. I mean, that truck goes most every day of the week once it's back on the road in the spring. We're actually replacing the radiator in it today. We thought we couldn't get one, but they found one for us over in Centerville, and that's being installed today. Our mechanic's back to work, and so he's getting that back on the road hopefully this week. So we'll see the sweeper back on the road if nothing else is wrong.
So,
in a couple
if
days.
there's a chance of getting demos here, then it's not something that's gotta be ordered and come from Florida like a fire truck or?
Not, if it's a conventional truck, they do make conventional trucks, but they can't seem to tell us on paper at least what the turning radius is. But they say, they've moved the broom forward, it can do tighter cul-de-sacs, almost like a cab over could do. But the cab over specialized truck would be probably a $50,000 to $75,000 premium, and then like a year and a half wait to get it. That's the problem.
So a lot of municipal units are continuing to repair their cab over like we are. The other thing that some are doing is actually buying older ones for parts, particularly the hydraulic components of it. But at this point in time, ours, we can get parts like the rad, we're gonna keep doing that. But then once we have the demo on the non-customized sweeper, we'll have a better idea if that's gonna work or not for us.
Is it in, I mean, obviously it's time to replace it, but is is it in rough shape? Like I know with the fire department, you know, they spend 350, which is relative, they spend 350,000 instead of 1.7 million for a new ladder truck, and then, you know, we can get another 10 or 15 years.
The biggest thing is the truck itself is obsolete. It's branded by GMC, but it's an Isuzu, and you can't get parts for it. If you can, they're kind of aftermarket, and we're lucky to find the radiator alone without having one even built for, you know,
Yeah.
we end up paying a couple $1,000s, and we could have paid 10 to have one custom made for it if anybody would even do it.
Yeah.
So and that has two engines. There's the one for the truck and then the one for the sweeper. So
Yeah.
a lot of moving parts and to keep it on the road.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Maxwell.
Thank you. My question is around the street sweeper. I'm just wondering if it's really a necessary item, if we have to have a street sweeper. I know we tried to rent ours out one year. We weren't very successful in getting rent for it. I'm just wondering, you know, maybe can we downgrade it to just something that will look after the sewers or whatever, and do we really need to sweep the streets? I hardly ever see it on my street, and maybe once all summer, and 350,000 plus is a lot of money.
I would say three components in particular where there's really value added. A lot of times there's streets with heavy leaf and foliage falling onto the road, and obviously it helps with stormwater management. Being able to clean out catch basins. We have a number of catch basins in town that on a regular basis we do go in and clean them out. So if you were going to a third-party hydrovac to do that, you'd be into some kind of a contract around that piece. But then lastly is after you have any kind of construction on a street, having the street sweeper gives you the ability to deal with a lot of the loose debris. And the alternative to that would be typically attachments to, you know, some kind of a backhoe or it literally is a sweeper with a dustpan. And so, you know, I think it's one of those pieces that certainly if we see this and what we get for a demonstration seems to meet the needs, you know, it would be ideal. If it was something that became a more astronomical cost, obviously that's something we'd bring back and have a conversation with council on.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to you, CEO.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to buildings and major projects. So, Public Works building, there's two items. Folks recall last year, we did some repairs. There was some concrete repair on one side of the building need to be done. Some windows on the building were leaking. So there's two items this year. The lot itself has some drainage issues, so we have approximately 20,000 set aside here for drainage. But then there's also some steel storage cabinets that are required for the various gear at Public Works. So that's the 35. In this case here, we have McDonald Avenue Phase 2. Folks will recall last year we had a 2-year project which we tendered last year. So this is the second half of that project, which will complete McDonald Avenue. We have an application into the province with regards to the infrastructure projects. And so our portion of that, if we were successful, would be $844,000. There is a flood mitigation project that is already underway. Dillon Consulting is issuing a report with regards to that flood mitigation, so that's $60,000. And on the sidewalk side, the last time we were here, we had brought forward information with regards to essentially work that was going to be on Park Street. Director Bell was able to go out and do some measurements in front of the Main Street station here. And so we have approximately in total on sidewalks, 250,000. 100,000 is related to Park Street. 150,000 is related to the work out in front of Main Street Station as per the conversations in February with council. So the total budget being $2,014,000, borrowing at $910,95, reserves at $35,000, gas tax. So these are one of these items that would be eligible for gas tax, $450,000, and then a capital contribution of $618,905. And And when I'm talking about Park Street, this, there is some work, obviously, was approved there last year as you come around the corner down by the Ultramar there. So this actually extends Park Street towards Main. There were some repairs there in front of Hairliner Studio. So now we move towards trails and streets. Oh,
Deputy Mayor?
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. So again, I'm just sort of going back to the borrowing piece so we're borrowing 45% of the total of this, again, due to the nature of the projects. Reserve 35. So we're taking very little out of the reserve, right? Obviously, comparatively, when you look at $2 million. And so the method to that is, again, because of the longevity and because of the,
yeah,
Okay.
particularly McDonald Avenue and our application we have in for ICIP.
Right.
Those two items, when you would put them on your books, would likely have a 40 to 50-year life.
right,
And so you would have a borrowing on those that would be more like 10 to 20-year money. And so thinking about the asset would pay itself off and then would have a longevity of essentially twice the timeline in which you borrowed on it.
so that borrowing of 900, a little north of 900,000, that will be over 10
So-
years, 15 years?
So the minimum is 10 and the maximum is 20.
Okay.
We normally borrow at 10.
Okay,
And so, but also would depend on what do they give us for rates
Yeah.
once we land on that.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you. Do we know specifically what streets will be worked on this year? And is it only Main Street Station and Park Street, like that area there, Park Street running through? Is that the only sidewalks that we're going to do, or are there others?
Yeah, so there's a number of others that are gonna fall under the AT plan. So these are the ones that are outside of the AT plan and specifically being done, and we'll, certainly we can walk through those when we get to that section of the budget.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, under trails and streets, we've got, some funding that were set aside, and again, the majority of this is related back to work around accessibility, so Miners Marsh Trail, 35,000, West Main Pathway, 165,000, the Aldershot Trail, Rail Trail, 150,000, the sign line painting, folks will recall there's a lot of work with regards to putting bicycle lanes and whatnot in place and making sure that lanes are marked on the roads. So that's at 55,100. The Harvest Moon Trail Connector, so 1,666,000. So 666,000 of this was actually awarded last year with regards to the multi-use trails. And then the 1 million is really when we start talking about the inner loop in the downtown here. So that's work that needs to be awarded this year. So that is actually the entire inner loop essentially of the downtown here, replacing a lot of the existing brickwork and whatnot that's there now. We have downtown improvements, and this is very specifically, we have a number of lights downtown that are not LED, and these are ornamental lights, but they're not LED lights, and it's time for them to be replaced. So there's 20,000 set aside for that. Within the streets category, this 200,000 is very specific to Canaan Avenue. So this is the retaining wall that's needed. So there was some drill holes were placed to determine the soil composition, and a retaining wall is going to need to be designed and awarded to stabilize the bank on Canaan Avenue. And so this is under the streets category. And then with regards to the storm sewer, there's two specific pieces of work under storm sewer. One is South Condon, there's about 80,000 there, and on Park Street itself, about 170,000. So in total, this area has 2,541,100 in a total budget, borrowing of $1,002,362, 20,000 from our reserve, and $1,518,738 from capital contributions.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, to the chair. So, So again, the borrowing piece against the reserve piece seems really small. And I don't want to keep belaboring this or asking the same question, and it sounds like I am. Sorry. Could we take more out of reserve if we, and I mean, at the end of, sorry, I'm asking and then I'm speaking. At the end of the day, I mean, it's gonna depend on what that overall, you know, what our debt to, what our indicators look like.
Right. So I think two things, and obviously the operational budget is the next piece
Yes.
that we're gonna be doing in about a week, but.
Sure.
What it really comes down to is that year over year, our operational reserves that we set aside are almost equal, what we drive, we put in.
Okay.
On the capital side this year, we've got essentially a decrease of, not quite 400,000. And so could you do more? You can do more, but also recognizing that, in this case, if we're successful in our ICIP projects, the work that's happening in year one would be very much related to stormwater mitigation, getting a base road essentially dug up and the things in place you need. And that's where if you're successful, your contributions from the federal and the provincial governments are big.
Okay.
So there may be a bigger, when you get to kind of year 2 and 3 of this kind of a project, that's where you may want to then see your capital reserves be pulled in to cover off things like, you know, a major connector is going to have more than a 2-inch asphalt surface.
Right.
So when you get to 4-inch, the cost of that, it may be worthwhile to say, we're going to put more money into that from our capital reserves
Okay.
at that point than necessarily borrowing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
Cool.
you. That makes sense.
Counselor Sabia.
Thank you. Do you want me to ask through you to the
No, no,
CEO
yeah,
or
direct.
just because of that motion? Just wondering, because I don't think it was on this report, if we know what the debt service ratios are gonna look like, kind of projected over that 5-year period. I know they were missing from the original presentation. It'd be kind of nice to know. And I only ask because the borrow for this budget is like 3 times what we usually borrow around $1 million. And this year we're over $3 million, and even into year 7, I think it's like $7 million projected. So I'm a little concerned with that. I'm just wondering if those numbers, or if you have an estimation or an idea of what those are gonna look like.
So I don't have the exact in front of me, but the reality of it is, if you recall from the last time we were here, year over year, our actual debt servicing has dropped because we actually weren't borrowing as much as we actually anticipated we were going to borrow in the last 2 years. And rates were low. So what we've got here is a couple of major projects. When you think about essentially all of the sidewalk work that's going to happen within the downtown, you talk about a major connector road as a potential project and replacing a couple of large assets. These are those types of things that it's kind of like buying a house. You're gonna go out and over 2 or 3 years, you're gonna spend a fair bit of money that is really intended to have that very long-term asset for the town. And so I agree the numbers are up, but this is certainly well within the ability of the town based upon the growth that you see in revenues to be able to afford it. And I believe, and I'll make sure I'll get the chart to everybody, but the chart the last time, I think what we were tracking at was we actually saw year over year, there was a dip in the debt servicing, and then the debt servicing is going to climb, but we're still only talking about being in the 8.5% to 9% range with the changes that are there. And, you know, really, we're talking about major assets that, you know, we still want to have some, we'll call it rainy day money in our capital reserves as we move forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. About the Harvest Moon. So I guess I've talked to a few people, and I was also of the opinion, when it was talked about last fall, a few people said, you know, they aren't just gonna tear up perfectly good sidewalk just to put in, and that's exactly what they did. And I'm just wondering if we could get, or I could get, a more detail of what they're gonna do, and whether it's gonna be the same of perfectly good sidewalk tear it up just to add a few feet onto the side?
We can certainly get more information, send to all council, and,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So, we'll make a note of that and send through, this is kind of we've got, well, the 666,000 is already awarded, that's relatively straightforward. And, the residual is really the inner loop, which is, a lot of bricks need to come up in the downtown core.
Okay, that was gonna be my other, because when we were on Public Works and we were talking about sidewalks, it was two little spots, but the inner square is in the,
So not center square, but the inner loop.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
that's.
Correct, you got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, all
But
right,
we'll get that information sent out and all council will have
okay,
that.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So now we're on to the development side of things. We have some permitting software that is going to speed up our process between ourselves and the county. So there's 25,000 set aside for that software. The VIC building itself, which has kind of undergone some transformations over the last little bit around things like being able to keep it open longer and so on. In this case, there's a lot of work specific to the front entrance of the building to make it accessible, to meet the standards that we have. So there's 28,000 set aside. The green space project, this is all very much hardscaping and landscaping in a number of places here in town. Center Square beautification, so there is some kiosks and some greening, and the idea of placing a small fountain in Center Square, so that's $7,800. And then with the downtown betterments, this is benches, bike racks, some seasonal lighting of 33,000. So a total of 104,800 on the development side, and that is 100% from reserves. So next we will go to.
Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you. I don't know if this is under this section or not, but I had a question with the economic development, $10,000 for
Is-
public art. Is
yeah,
that the mural festival?
No, so that actually is, when the pages on this book, so that actually doesn't go into the total, it's a mistake in the summary.
Okay.
So that doesn't impact the total. That was, yes, it was from a couple of years ago when we were putting the book together. One side, the page got changed and the other side was an old page, so you
Okay.
can just cross that out.
Yeah.
That's one of those pages that was, a mistake.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Sabian?
Thank you. Just wondering, with the economic development, the Center Square improvements where it's got 42,000 over the 5 years. Year one says 7,800, that's just for the fountain or, because it says there water fountain, greening and kiosks.
So really, at this point, it's the greening and the water fountain that we're looking at. There's some kiosks we already have, and we just moved them off-site. So there's some money to move them around when we need them. But essentially, there's some greening efforts, which is the majority of that. And the water fountain piece is a piece that we're looking at. And I don't have the exact cost on that, but I'm happy to break that down if we want to know some more detail around that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes, I forgot to ask the question. With the VIC and the changes that we're making there, are we going to be able to get some winter use out of that building or fall use out of that building rather than just during the summer?
That is
Just
the hope.
wondering.
That is the hope. So there's been some work already to extend the season, because the large parts of that building weren't insulated. There was nothing there, and so the intention is to be able to turn that into a year-round. This particular piece, though, is all about the accessibility into the building from the front.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so next we're gonna talk about recreation and green space. So, the Ravine Trail, there is essentially, we're talking here very specifically about the lower entry at Eves Hollow. There's a bunch of design work in order to figure out how we're gonna essentially move that back into being a usable entry point. So there's $50,000 around design planning with regards to, that space. Miners Marsh Trail, there's, some repairs that are needed from a washout. There's also some improvements to accessibility, so there's about 20,000 there. Miners Mark picnic area, so this is the area when you go in behind the Justice Complex, and if you go across the bridge and turn right. There's an area there with some picnic tables. That area is going to be upgraded into a, we'll call it a better picnic area. And then the Miners Marsh staircase, so this is in behind the church. There's a steep slope there, and there's a staircase is needed to be able to access behind there. So 85,000 for the budget, and the total of that is coming from reserves.
Councillor York.
Thank you, through the chair, if I might. The ravine trail design, are we any closer to the ravine trail opening in general for us to access it with this new entrance?
Excuse me. So within the $50,000, we have, to what CAO Troke said, the design for the lower entry, which is what we wanted to do before things happened. So that's part of that design. The other piece is within their signage to educate folks so that we can reopen in the late spring, the current entryway.
Okay,
So that's our hope that we're able to do that.
that's exciting.
Yeah, so we're kind of doing two things at the same time.
Okay,
There's going to be a lot of education around how to do that safely.
thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
The Miners Marsh staircase, and I think Councillor Maxwell asked about this before. It's right directly behind the church?
Excuse me. So you can see, yeah, you can see where people are taking that path down there, and it's they've just essentially created the line that we're going to use because it's quite slippery.
It's quite steep though, right?
It's very steep. Yeah.
So will it just be a straight staircase, going down?
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but it'll be safer than sending.
That's
people
great
down
though to
slippery
have that
slope.
there, yeah.
Yeah, we generally, certainly in recreation, I don't know about public works, but we call that a goat trail. So where people are already going, we're just essentially doing what they've told
Right.
us.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's another option. Honestly, we could put in a really nice tube slide. My option, but you know.
All right.
Okay. So now we'll shift to Memorial Park. So there is some upgrades to the ball field irrigation. We've earmarked 20,000. The grandstands at 450,000, and yes, we will apply for every grant we can possibly find to try and reduce that number down. But remember, this is not about just simply taking out and replacing it like what is there now. There is a retaining wall is required, and once again, the ability of folks to be able to access this, the accessibility standard around bleachers. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. So. The 450,000 at this point, we certainly are going to be applying for everything we can, but that would essentially demolish what's there, put a retaining wall in, and put accessible bleachers in place. I see the councilor's light on. I don't know if we want to.
Councillor
Thank you.
Maxwell.
I'm just wondering what we're going to do for this ball season up and coming. Is this going to be able to be ready for this ball season? Are we going to use what's there? What's this going to do?
So line 5 down, bleacher replacement. So we're going to be purchasing 3 to 4 additional small bleacher systems to bring in. You'll see them around all our soccer fields and baseball fields. And then we'll be bringing over some from additional fields that are being used.
Okay.
And then the project should take majority of the summer, so we'll be off limits.
Okay, so there will be something there for people to view. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I had asked at an earlier, I think, capital meeting about the lights and about price on what it would cost to, did we find out what an astronomical price would be? Or if there's any grants to put LEDs or something in, solar
Is that for replacement of the light bulbs or the actual lighting,
lighting?
like the posts? Yeah.
My main concern is the posts that
For
are
sure.
older than me.
Yeah. I think we have it planned for 4 years out, and we have a budget of around $1 million for the senior field.
Thank you.
Yep.
Big number for lights, yes. And that's why it's 4 years out.
CEO.
The playground gazebo, so this is a new to the playground. One of the biggest things is that providing shade is crucial as our summers get hotter and folks are going out with kids, they need to have a place where they can go, so we're looking at a gazebo. Bike course, this is the short track, so the nationals, while we're kind of hearing about the mountain bike stuff, there is, with regards to here at Memorial Park, a short track trail that there's going to be events on, so there's some work that needs to be done there. You've already heard about the bleacher replacement, so these are the portables that we use right now. And the $10,000 with regards to fencing, this is existing fencing that just because of wear and tear and all the things that happen, that needs to be, every year we continue to go back and replace various fences in various locations. So it's a bit of a placeholder. So the budget of 515,000, borrowing of 450, and 65,000 from reserve. So the borrowing component, you notice, is very much tied to the grandstand. So if we can get more grants, then that number goes down.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. So in terms of grants and applying for them, what's, well, I mean, what's the possibility, but how, like, would it be, could it potentially be a significant amount? Or are we talking like little bits?
And so I think well, and I'll let some others speak, but I think what our approach is we apply for everything we can go
Okay,
after.
yeah.
And even if it's a bunch of smaller, then typically cobbling them together can be
Okay.
a sizable savings. But, this is our normal, I'm gonna say conservative approach to putting a budget together.
yeah.
So if absolutely nothing else happened, this is kind of where you land. But what typically, of course, happens is we have some really great grant writers. I think Rachel has an entire team of them down there. Yeah. And so we're usually pretty successful. The bigger items, in some cases, unfortunately, I know this sounds weird, but a $450,000 isn't often considered that big of a project.
Yeah.
So, if we can scramble after, 3 or 4, $20,000 or $25,000 ones, then that's going to make a significant amount off the bottom line.
Okay.
We did, try to even look at having some of the excavation work and whatnot done by Public Works, but the reality of it is, when we started getting the quotes and the liability that gets assumed when you're doing demolition, it economically wasn't a whole lot more advantageous to have us demolition the site than having the person who's gonna go put them up to do it, so, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right.
So, the parks and playgrounds. So we have the dog park on here, and what you see is there is essentially grass seeding that needs to occur. And then there is essentially, and as an entry point, there needs to be a little bit of work from the trail to access the park. So we've got an estimate there of 6,000. The pocket park at Mill Run and the park trail at Deer Haven, both of these are very tied to working with community groups who are interested in seeing these trails progress. So some of the money we've earmarked for the engagement side of this, some of it we've also earmarked for the landscaping side of it. So if there's some work that we need to go in as some seed money to get some things started. So we've set aside 10,000 for each one of these projects. Oak Dean Park, where we have, right now, we've been kind of using Oak Dean Park washroom playground. So the upgrades to the playground itself, there is the dipping station, but really on the washroom side, there is a planning piece that needs to be done, not just around the washroom itself, but also around, there's the whole thought of having a building to associate with picnics and stuff like that. So the total around Oak Dean Park is 42,500, with the majority of that this year being around upgrades to the playground and moving ahead with the dipping station. The Gorge Bridge, there was some flooding occurred that really has destabilized the bridge, so that 40,000 is pretty specific to getting work done and having that reviewed by an engineer. The gorge updates, this 15,000 is tied to the national mountain bike events that are happening. And then with regards to the Burger Hill Bike Track, this is one of those items, we have 30,000. We are anticipating that we will have some partners who will be bringing grants to the table. But similar to the other one at this point, this is about essentially extending the track, making the track longer. And we do anticipate that number right now, that would be us covering the full cost. That is one of those we do believe will come down. So in total, it's 153,500 with 138,500 coming from reserves and then a capital contribution of 15,000.
Councillor York.
Thank you, through the chair. Is the Gorge Bridge the first bridge you encounter on Curious Gorge there as you cross the river?
Curious
or is
George,
it?
yeah, we took Curious George off of this as what we were using instead, but that's exactly it.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So then the arena. So the arena, where the Zamboni essentially is, there's a pit there that the snow goes into. There was some drainage issues, so we need some work in order to make sure that the water drains, and we didn't want to have pumps or anything, so this was intended to be set up so there would be a natural ability for that to drain. There's rubber flooring of 15,000, ceiling fans of 20,000. The sign, which is basically replacing the sign on the side, and this would be a digital sign at 50,000. And a glycol cooling system upgrades of 20,000. So a total of 130,000 into the arena for capital, with 130,000 coming from a reserve we have set aside.
Councillor York.
Thank you, through the chair. Are these costs, I think or rather, I know it was Councillor Zabian's request that we get from the Parks Department, sort of a image capture of what it's going to cost sort of year after year for each of the facilities. Is this what we're going to be expecting as a capital ask, more or less, year after year in this?
So no, your capital ask is going to go up.
Okay, okay,
And this is right now some basic maintenance.
yeah,
And, you know, at this point in time, I think to the rink as a Centennial Arena has some real TLC that's required. And I think it's also one of those pieces where, just the slab itself and some of the systems associated with that, that's where I think that bigger conversation, but this is kind of bare bones maintenance.
okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. The glycol cooling system, is that replacing?
That's an addition to condenser for energy efficiency.
Okay.
Should help with their heating and cooling bills as well in the future.
Thank you.
Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Just have a little concern about the sign, because we know the arena's a little tired, and we may, there may be conversation down the line about other avenues. Do we want to really put $50,000 into a sign? We've had some bad luck with signage before, and is that something that, we really need? Just gonna throw that out there. Thank you.
I think the biggest piece is that we've kind of taken the sign to a place where it's more than just kind of general information, and generally that we're using it for overall public information. And so whether it remains as an item that's attached to the rink or it's used in another location is an option, I suppose. And, but I also think it's one of those parts where, over and above, there's public skate today or whatnot, there's a real opportunity to be using signage for, just sharing information with folks. With regards to the sign itself, obviously, there's all kinds of ways to look at signage, and whether we have somebody who's going out and putting little sticky things on it or whatnot. This is just a little more efficient, having electronic signs so that someone keys it in inside, takes a couple of minutes, and then they go back to doing the things that they do at the rink kind of thing. So that's essentially why we have it there at this point. You're welcome.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. Still talking about the sign, is there a possibility that it could be rented by groups or businesses for a cost?
I think traditionally we've tried to make it as static as possible.
Okay,
Now, it means you're still gonna have updates in the run of a day.
Sure.
But, I don't know that we've ever gone down the road of renting that space out.
Okay.
We also have very strict guidelines that we need to follow because of our own signage bylaw.
yes.
So we're already limited in what we're able to put up there, so it needs to be, sorry, the amount of what we're able to put up there is quite
Yes.
limited. So traditionally, it's always been our own things that we advertise. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't advertise for the Silver Gliders event that's already happening at the arena. And Home Show, as an example, off the top of our head, that's
Yeah.
this weekend, everybody. Yeah. But it's something to look into. We're just following what we're
Yeah.
allowed to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so, now, where am I at? There we go, sorry, I skipped one. So where I have under pools here, drains and skimmer, this essentially is the pool loses water every day. And a lot of it, and it's not the concrete slab we're talking about here, it's the mechanics, we're losing water. And so the cost of that is, a piece, and then environmentally, obviously, it's a piece. So, this is about an exploration of what the issue is with regards to that water loss, and then assuming that there's going to have to be something that is going to be changed mechanically to address that. And so the truth is, we really don't know why it's losing water, but we know it's losing a lot of water. And so that's what we have there as part of our investigation on that. Obviously, if there was something more major was wrong other than something in the mechanics, we'd be bringing it back here for a conversation. But at this point in time, we don't know what we don't know, and this is to explore and find out what's going on. So it's with regards to the mechanics, and we'll call it the drains and the skimmers, but this is really a leaky pool that we gotta find out what's going on with it. The windscreen, this is essentially a screen at tennis, so there's 10,000 for that. The fencing, this essentially is increasing the height of the fence at the Little League diamond, so that as balls fly over the fence to the tennis court, and trying to avoid any challenges there. And the lights here are very specific to the skate park itself, so there's some lighting at the skate park that's required. So 117,500, 50,000 in borrowing, and 67,500 as a reserve.
Councillor Gerard?
Thank you, Worship. So the drains and the skimmer, is that investigation and fix?
Yeah. Unless there's something more major, so we're always able to recapture the water and keep the pool running. So there is a leak somewhere within that mechanical, we're gonna find what it is, and then obviously repair that. And quite frankly, it's one of those things, could be simple, could be more complex. We don't anticipate this is an overhaul of the system. There's something losing significant amounts of water somewhere, and we just gotta find that and then repair what that is.
I was worried that the 50,000 was for a plumber to send a camera down there to see if there's. a leak.
No.
No, that's good, thank you.
Councillor York?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm really excited to see another investment in the skate park. I think it's an asset that we certainly could use another investment of cash and put some importance behind it. I'm hoping, or I'm optimistic rather, that the investment of lights will encourage more events happening in there. That's exciting. Thank you.
So we get to the summary page where essentially I've just rolled up the information from each of the items. So the total capital budget of $6,605,900. Again, remember, much of this is predicated upon things like getting funding from the federal provincial government to start a large project, the ability, if we have a street sweeper that meets our needs, and also we fully anticipate going after as many grants as possible for some of the bigger projects. So the borrowing at $3,017,453, obviously that's an item if we have an ability to get grants, that's a number that does go down. But from our reserves, 915,800, gas tax 450,000. We already do know that we are going to be getting a doubled up gas tax again this year, so the gas tax coming in will be over 500,000 for this coming year. And then on an operating side, there's 67,000 and a capital contribution of 2,155,643. So total budget, 6,605,900.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. The connector road, and I had written down here, is there a reserve for that? So I see in 2024, 2025, 25, 26, the ICIP government funding. Will we be setting up a separate reserve for that specific project?
So.
And sorry, maybe
yeah.
I should have asked that sort of in between. while we
No, that's
were-
okay.
Okay, thanks.
So really, there's three pieces. The speed that you would get cash flow from the federal provincial government may be slower than the speed at which you build.
Right.
And so it might be that there is a short-term requirement to carry a construction phase, knowing the money's going to come in the following year.
Okay.
Because at the front of these things, you write a commitment letter and boom, it's locked down.
Sure.
The second piece, though, is that because this is water, sewer, and then you have the roadway itself, all of the funding doesn't come from the town's envelope. Some of it would be coming from water and sewer. And so, you know, at this point in time, the ability to utilize certainly reserves in, we'll call it a year two or a year three, is there. And there might be a desire, as I said, things like as we get, things like doubled up gas tax and whatnot as they've come in, there may very well be that decision point in next year's budget. Do we want to squirrel away some money in for the last year, or however we want to play that? At this point in time, it's really about first get the grant.
Yeah.
And then once we have the grant, do the design work that allows us to go out on the street and see what we get for a price.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. What I'm wondering is, not just for counselors' information, because we do see a lot of information in the financial, but especially when we're putting things on our site for the public to see. One of the things we're very blessed with is having great people to get grants for us. Hats off, for sure. But what I'm wondering is, under example, recreation, would there be a way to show, yes, this is what the plans are and this is what the spending is going to be, but another column that would say grants received and the money that comes there? So then people could at least see, oh, okay, that'll help balance this, I mean, I don't know if that's a big ask or a small ask, and I know it takes time for grants to come in, so I understand all that timetable, but,
Right.
yeah.
So certainly happy to look at it. The most, to me, one of the ways might be is when we show the work that is ongoing on our website, there may be a way to kind of, you know, break some of that out. But I have to talk to people who are way smarter at this than me when it comes to how you put this information together. So we'll take a look at it, and if there's a way to do it, certainly we'll inform council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. To follow up on what Deputy Mayor Savage was asking about the connector road. With what happened in the last year and this year with McDonald Avenue and Brayside, and this is a multi-season, how do we put something forward or tender something to make sure that it's feasible every year, instead of going, this is what it is this year, and then next year, you know, having a contractor go, the price of everything's doubled?
Yeah, I think the way you do that is, so kind of two phases. Your first phase is all the infrastructure would go in under one contract. So everything below the street, and then you've got your base set up, and then your final phase is somebody who's coming in and doing the paving. Because the piece that's really been the accelerator in the last 2 years has been plastic pipe. And so at least you could lock in, and let's just say your infrastructure was 12 to 18 months. Because while it's a big stretch, a lot of your infrastructure that's going to be happening is at nodes, because it's not essentially the entire piece. And so going down that road, and getting that price up front pretty much means all the plastics are in the ground at that point. So then the only thing that wouldn't be would be that thicker lift of asphalt that you're gonna need to do to complete the road. So if you kind of thought about it as, it could be one contract, but really your expensive part of this is that in the ground piece. And that's the piece that when you tender that, it's gonna be, do the whole thing, and if the whole thing's 12 months, 18 months, whatever that is, that's gonna be what it's gonna be as a price up front.
As a follow-up, a lot of this is being funded by grants. And the grants were based off of, this is what it's gonna cost, this is an estimate of what it's gonna cost. The grants don't ever waver if, just the question, but.
Yeah. No, they don't, but so also that process does allow you to build contingency. It's not a big number, but it does allow you to do some. And I think the other piece in this particular case here, where when we're talking about this, it's surface area that has had work before, so you're not digging into the woods.
Fresh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Councillor York.
Thank you. Through the chair, as we look at transportation and specifically as it relates to the vehicles we intend to purchase, knowing that the shelf life of those is ever smaller, is it something that we need to investigate or look into whether we should be borrowing or not, given that we likely will not be getting those previous decades worth of time out of them?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the reality of it is that, you know, when we, from a book value perspective, we'd say 10 years. I think as we go forward, you know, so there's always this challenge with if you went out and leased a vehicle, there's certain things you're not allowed to do. And ironically, often what happens is those things like undercoat your vehicle would then extend the life of it. So the good thing about when we buy, and we buy very specific to our needs in Kentville, our folks doing the mechanical work do everything to try and get that 10-year life. What we've noticed ironically is some of the things in the most recent vehicles has been things like, while much of the body of the vehicle is in good shape, the electronic components aren't protected against salt. And so those are the pieces that the more when we put specs out, the more we see that those components maybe are protected or maybe have a longer warranty on them, then the better they are. But to your point, you know, eventually what's going to happen is so as a truck that we have today and, you know, let's just say in 2 or 3 years you're ordering your next one, the probability of that next one saying we're gonna get 10 years out of it is not very likely. The other piece is because of the winter events and, you know, all we have is history to go off of. Even when we have a great year, we put the same amount of salt down on the road that we would in a not great year. And so while we're not plowing snow, that salt going down, mixing with water on the underside of the vehicle is essentially what deteriorates the vehicle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. We had quite an extensive discussion at the Inclusion and Accessibility meeting the other day, and the Cornwallis Street sidewalk was a large part of that discussion. And basically what we're being told, the members on that committee, is that that sidewalk is not at all accessible. It's in absolutely terrible shape. And some of our people on that committee have been told that citizens feel like second-class citizens in this town having to walk up and down that sidewalk. I understand that, you know, there's infrastructure underneath there, but we really need to do something. If we could just put some asphalt down or something, but to leave that sidewalk the way it is until we're ready to go underneath and fix the infrastructure, I think it's an accident waiting to happen, and it doesn't help our accessibility in this town or our inclusiveness and allowing people with disabilities to maneuver about town properly. So I'd like to see some thought put into including that stretch of sidewalk and what we can do in this budget to, you know, to fix that situation.
Thank you, and happy to do that. Specifically, is there a certain section there that is the area of concern?
I think it's pretty much the whole thing.
Okay, you answered my question.
Yeah. I couldn't run down it.
Okay, fair
So,
enough, fair enough.
yeah, it's not good at all.
Certainly, we're happy to take a look at it, and then, of course, council will recall this year, during the year, they did approve some additional funding during the year, so we can go get a price on if we did, patching versus a longer-term piece, at least to give council some sense on that. And so then it would be one of those items, particularly once we get our bids on the street this year for other projects, we could then solidify what a volume would be, X meters. And, council certainly after the fact could consider that as an additional piece once we get the number and see what it looks like.
Yeah, and one other thing, if you're coming back to us with information, we've always had some charts, some really nice graphs to look at, especially on our debt service ratio and our debt service ratio per capita and so on. And this is a very large budget, and I do believe in investing in our town and putting money into the town. I think that maybe we haven't done that, but I want to make sure, in the past, but I want to make sure that we're still staying at a good financial level in doing that. And, but I do feel that we need to make investment in our town. We need to fix some of the things that need fixing, and we do have to do this. But when I'm looking at, $1 million one year and then it's bang, 3 million or more over the next 5 years, I think I just want to make sure that those parameters are all okay. And I know that we're growing and we're going to get more tax revenue and so on, but yeah, I'd just like to see some of the charts. We can do that.
CAO, I believe you had the charts in the last presentation to us.
I did, and I can.
Perhaps the clerk could pull that up and just.
Sure. If
Just to,
folks to see them?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the February meeting presentation will be right at the back.
To have the capital in it?
Yeah, that was the capital one that we did on February 21st. Councilor Zabin, we'll go to you while.
I'll wait
we're waiting.
until those come up. I kind of hindered on that.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, did you want to?
Sure, through the
okay.
chair. So thank you for all the work done on the budget. It's excellent, it's robust, and as to Councillor Maxwell's point, we're investing in the town. In our February 21st discussions, I had mentioned something, I think some of the other councillors had as well, with respect to the Heritage Center. And some of that, the word just left me, I think it's fascia.
The fascia, yes.
Fascia, sorry, not
Yeah.
it's fascia, fascia. Did we cost any of that out? Is that something that we,
So so we didn't, so last year we put about $30,000.
Yes, the roof,
into the
sure.
building. And so what we were looking at is obviously getting it roof tight. That was the biggest concern at
Right.
that point. We had a staff member go down and do a little bit of work throughout the year. The fascia piece at this point in time, we didn't have it in there. We were continuing to hope to be able to continue to do just some painting and caulking with regards to the building. And certainly the biggest concern to the group utilizing it was the fact that the roof had deteriorated such that the water was going to create additional damage in the building. And so that piece was completed last year, but we didn't have anything specific for the fascia for this year.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Clerk has found the.
Oh, good. Right, so what we had looked at is we were looking at the budget in 22-23 versus the actual. You can see there the borrowing requirements. We actually were significantly under what we thought we were going to be borrowing. And so when we were bringing it forward to the 23-24 budget, Now, we've actually, the number right now that's in front of you is higher than the number at that point. A, we've added a few things. But B, also, we've had a number of items that long-term, because of the nature of them, we added them to the borrowing line versus the capital line. And so what you're seeing is that we continue to put a very large borrowing number out there, but we never actually borrowed that entire amount. And some of that's the grants piece, and some of it, the items that, quite frankly, like the street sweeper, the year over year over year, kind of, as if we don't pull the pin on it, it's an item that you don't go and buy and you don't borrow. And with regards to did we have the debt servicing percentages in that one? Okay, yeah, so that was where we were looking at, that was uniform assessment. So that was the growth in the assessment, and if you go to the next one, next one. That was showing where we were actually, repaying more than we were borrowing. And, no, that's the house, okay. So really, when you look at that, see the debt service number on the second row up from the bottom, so we're at around 9, that's okay. So you've got 9.2%. So our calculations were showing that number dipping below 9% because of, we didn't borrow as much in 23, 24, so the year just gone by. And we were looking at that number essentially remaining below 9% for the next year or two, but I will go back and run those calculations based on the numbers that are in here and certainly circulate that to council.
Yeah, I'd like to see those percentages.
Yeah, no problem.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question on vehicles and equipment. I know when I was on the Valley Waste, because their vehicles and equipment are, we just saw $350,000. Would it make sense, or maybe we do, but I couldn't find it, to earmark a reserve for vehicle and equipment repair separate from?
Sure. So actually, the best thing that could happen would be we get back to having a provincial standing offer that can get adequate supply, because those prices in that volume are substantive. So now, that's really for 1 ton, 2 ton kind of vehicles, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, it cuts your borrowing on your vehicles on those fronts in half. So that's where there's really great bang for the buck if that were back up. But that's a supply issue from the manufacturers and the ability of the province to be able to tap into that. When it comes to vehicles, though, the larger vehicles, absolutely. I think particularly if we got the sense that these vehicles, from a price escalation perspective, we're starting to climb. We have our new loader. We have, I would say, in our larger vehicles, the only piece of equipment that we probably want to look at, only because right now we rent it, would be a mini excavator. And so what we're paying to rent a mini now, we probably are equal to if we owned it instead of renting it. And that's really on the water side, right? That's where that would pay dividends. So that's certainly something we're going to look at. On the truck side, with this single axle coming in, a real question becomes, as time goes on, how robust do you need snow removal versus the salting and the ability to get in with essentially a 3500 versus a single axle, right? So, but that reserve piece that we do, quite frankly, we basically plow all our surpluses back in to reserves, and we have reserves set aside, so as the town
So
calls.
it's robust enough that we don't really have to.
Well,
worry.
I think your point being, and where I think it would go, is that if we saw those, let's say if it happened every 8 years and we started going north of 400,000, you might at that point in time want to have something specific, kind of like how municipalities who operate a little bit different, Kentville, they put a fire truck reserve away every year. And typically it's, $50,000 or whatever, but it's then to buy down what you're gonna borrow in year 8.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Zapian.
Thank you. I just want to thank the staff, because I know they put a lot of hard work into this. So the projects are all great. I'm still sitting here and I'm not comfortable with the borrowing amount. So just speaking for myself, whether we tap into the reserves a little more or we, fine tune it a little bit. I know I went back to look at the history of Kentville, and the borrowing was always around 1 million, 1.2, I think was the year before. I mean, that's a big borrow, and there's no predictability of what the future's gonna hold. I always remember my dad used to say, it's gonna rain someday, and you don't know what's gonna happen. So I don't have a comfort level with the way it's structured right now. I'm gonna put that out there. And the other thing is, really like to see the Heritage Center, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, built into this, that little amount that they need, because they've been 3 years now looking to have some treatment around their windows, and I'd like to see that fixed in there so that we know it's gonna be done, rather than have them come back every year with the same ask. So, that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship, through the chair. And I should know this, and I apologize, but the overall debt servicing, we typically we'd want to see it under 11, or is it under 10?
So each municipal unit sets their own plan, and
Right.
essentially for us, we want to be under 10.
Under
The
10.
reality of in the provincial world, it's a much higher ratio than that.
Sure, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so, what we always try to look at is, we've been in and around that 9% range for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we're actually going to fall below that this year. But the reality of it is that certainly you have plenty of borrowing room when you're in and around that 9%. There's very few municipal units are kind of in that place. Really, it's been the last 2 years that the expansion, when we look at Berks, when we look at McDonald, these are projects that have been on the books for years and years and years.
Sure.
And so it's one of those pieces that the infrastructure, there's only so much time before it's gonna break.
Yeah.
And I think, the majority of what you've got here is a change from the previous year. 1/3 of it is a brand-new project, and it's a major project. And, it's the type of thing where we would be paying 23 cents on the dollar. So that kind of a ratio, and yes, it's borrowing, but it's pretty good bang for the buck.
I understand, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, CAO, for that presentation. And as Councillor Zabian said, staff, thank you for the level of effort that you've put into this. So we were presented with a draft budget on February 21st. We provided our comments, staff went away and fulfilled all of our requests from that meeting. So based on that, we have a recommendation that council approve the 2023-2028 capital investment plan based on the revisions. So the motion would be that council approve the 2023-2028 council capital investment plan, or actually 2023-2024 Town of Kentville capital investment plan, the capital budget in the amount of $6,605,900, including the funding sources, and further that council approves the future years of 2024-25 to 2027-28 in principle, including the funding sources. 2024-25 is $7,481,600. 25-26 is $5,648,501. 2026-27 is $3,436,013, and 2027-28 is $7,160,000. If someone could move this, please. Thank you. Councillor Gerard. And a seconder. Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the 2023-2024 Town of Kentville capital budget in the amount of $6,605,900, including the funding sources, and further that council approves the future years 2024, 2025 to 2027, 2028 in principle, including the funding sources. 24-25 at $7,481,600, 2025-26 at $5,648,501, 26-27 at $3,436,013, 2027-28 at $7,333,000, $160,000. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm not entirely comfortable in voting approval without knowing what our debt service ratios are going to look like over the next 5 years. So I kind of would like to see a graph on that before I make a determination on whether I want to go down that road or not. It's like right now, I don't feel like I have enough information to do that.
Okay. Thank you. CAO, did you wish to respond to that other than what's already been said?
Well, so the two pieces, I guess, in this is really, in order to dramatically reduce the borrowing number, then you're gonna have to deplete your capital reserves. And so those capital reserves really, at this point, are, really earmarked for 2 or 3 years out if we get a major project. So essentially, unless we're cutting the budget, what we have on the table, other than, and I don't mean this to sound small, but if you moved $100,000 or $200,000 from one capital reserve to the borrowing, that borrowing number is going to come in lower once we do get some various grants against it. It's not going to come in higher. But to entertain a large project, we're going to have to borrow the money that is on the table. So the only thing that's going to change in that, and 100,000 or 200,000 moving from capital reserve to borrowing, is not going to impact your debt servicing number all that much. And we are not in a position where we're going to be approaching, a 10% debt servicing number. So we can certainly get the numbers, and council can certainly wait. But the reality of it is it's actually moving amounts from one to the other. This is a $6.6 million budget. So short of a decision to say you're going to take things out of it, borrowing is going to be in the $3 million range.
I understand that, but I don't want to put us into a major debt position in the town. Although I do know we have lots of money in our investment account, and we can certainly cover that, or we could cover it by using that. But I don't know. I just, would like to know that we're going to keep our financial position in a good light, and I don't know where this is going over the next 5 years. That's all. I just don't. Maybe we need to hold the big project back. I don't know. It's just an uncomfortable feeling, not knowing where we're going to, where we're taking the town with, over the next 5 years with budgets that are now up over, 5 and 6 million. And in my history here, they've all been around 1 million or at the most 2 million. So, it's, makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I do believe in investing in the town, though. I believe we have to do that. But, I don't want to sink us. So.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. And so I'm just going to make a couple comments, and then even just through the chair to the CAO. And, to Councillor Maxwell's point, it's a big budget, 6.6 million, and I think it's a testament to the town growing. Like, we're really, really growing in quite a exponential nature. So it really is about getting comfortable with it, right? That's the big piece. So, hearing the CAO saying that the DSC piece won't be more than 10% and that will be well within our limits, I think that's important. And I think it is really just getting comfortable with it, because it is new and it is higher and it is more than we've invested in the past number of years. But I think it just is a testament to Kentville growing and the expansion that's going to happen over the ensuing probably 2 to 5 years is pretty incredible. And so it's, but we all have to be comfortable with it. But I think that's definitely what happened, what is happening. And I'm comfortable with that debt servicing piece, that we won't be, going over where we should be going and where we've gone in the past few years. So it's just my comment around it.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. Sticker shock is a real thing. And, you know, I don't know about my colleagues, but I'm not used to working with numbers like these. And to Councillor Maxwell's point, and to Deputy Mayor Savage's point as well, it's a comfort factor. We do meet again as a group in a week. Is there an opportunity for us to review like a chart or the same information as a graphic, just to get more comfortable with it and vote on it in the week, so that we can all feel that little bit more comfortable and not potentially claw back projects to get it passed?
CAO?
We can make happen whatever council wants to have happen. I'm so happy to do that, if that's what council wishes, but we're comfortable.
All right, council, we could lay this motion on the table. It would be our first order of business at the April 24th council meeting. And CAO, if you could provide us within the next couple of days a debt servicing model chart that shows us exactly where we're going to be based on what we borrowed from last year and ongoingly. And as a note, last year's budget, we did expect to borrow almost 3.4 million, which was up from our norm. And as you have pointed out to us, we had years where we held off on infrastructure work because we didn't get grants. And you know, if you look at Burke's subdivision, we held off, and then we held off on McDonald and ended up with a 30% increase in the cost of pipes. So sometimes it hasn't paid us the dividends by the overcaution, and if we do have the capacity, as we've seen on that sheet at 9%, then perhaps it will give council a warm and fuzzy. So if it's within the capacity to get that out within the next couple days, and council will lay this on the table. And it will be our first motion at our council meeting under old business.
And if I could, I think on Monday, if it's possible for us to start at 5 to go through the operational budget. And then we can then slide into regular business, and then this capital item will be part of that.
Does anyone have an issue with starting at 5 p.m. on Monday, April the 4th? No? All right, Deputy Mayor, did you have something?
I just have one more thing, and
Sure,
it's
go
gonna
ahead.
probably give Councillor Maxwell heartburn, because I'm gonna ask for more money in the budget. You know what, just, if we can go back to the Heritage Center again, and maybe just add in a little bit for the fascia. Whatever that,
I don't have a problem with that.
whatever that might be.
We'll do our best to try
Okay.
and come up with a number in a couple of days.
All right.
I don't know what that'll look like.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll try and come up with a number and
Okay.
see what we can get.
All right, thank you.
And the Cornwall Street sidewalk.
I won't have that for you.
And I think if we're going to do the Cornwallis Street sidewalk, I do walk that 4 times a day, and I also run it. And I know that from Valley Tire up to Exhibition is the worst of it. That if, you know, we had to do an emergency repair, that would fix most of the ills of that street. All right, council, we have no further business, so therefore, at 5:28, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. See you on Monday.